Thank you all for being here. My name is Kiki and I'm on the organizing team for Alder Commons. For those of you who don't know, Alder Commons is an all ages community center in Northeast Portland. Welcome to our fall workshop week. We have so many awesome events and workshops planned for you, so please make sure to check out our website, aldercommons.org/workshops. I'll throw that in the chat in just a sec, so that you can see what else we have going on. We're going to kick off this week with today's wonderful workshop, Hawaiian-Style Poke Bowls, facilitated by the lovely Jenny Ching. Jenny is dedicated to empowering people to feel confident in the kitchen. She's the owner or founder of Laulima Kitchen, where she teaches virtual workshops, cooking workshops, specializing in simple, nourishing, and tasty gluten-free foods. Jenny understands the difficulties of living with celiac disease and knows that learning to cook celiac-safe meals is more than just using gluten-free ingredients. During her classes, she incorporates kitchen safety tips, gluten-free product recommendations, and time-saving cooking techniques. The term Laulima in Hawaiian roughly translates to mean many hands working together. So with all that being said, thank you, Jenny, and I'll pass over the mic to you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that really lovely intro. Hi, everybody. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jenny, and I am going to be teaching you how to make poke bowls today. So this recipe is very, very special to me. I actually am from Honolulu, Hawaii. So I grew up eating poke bowls all the time. Anytime I go home, it's like the first thing on the list of things that I want to eat. But unfortunately, a lot of times poke, you can't find it, like gluten-free versions of it. There are some, but especially with the shoyu poke, shoyu actually in Japanese means soy sauce. It's really hard to find, because many times shoyu isn't gluten-free. So I'm really excited to teach you guys how to make poke today. You'll find that it's much simpler than maybe you originally thought, but tastes so much better than I think store-bought. Anything fresh tastes so much better. So thank you guys for joining me in class today. I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but feel free to go ahead and grab all of your ingredients. Does anybody have, before we get started, does anybody have any questions on fish, ingredients, other things? I'm going to take silence as a no. Okay, cool. Well, if you think of any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or unmute yourself and ask away. Again, live classes are fun because you get to interact. That's the whole point, you know. Feel free to ask questions, even if it's something like slightly related and you're like, oh, this makes me think of something. I wonder what this is. Feel free to ask me. I can't 100% guarantee I can answer it, but I'd say like 90% confident. Cool. All right, so first things first, we're actually gonna go ahead and prepare all of our vegetables. So if you are making, today I'm gonna be making half shoyu, or half tofu, half ahi. And then I'll also make both the shoyu sauce and the spicy ahi sauce. So depending on what you are making today, feel free to just go ahead and follow along. For the tofu, I'm actually going to go ahead and just cut open the container. I'm going to just drain out all this excess liquid. And what we're going to do today is we are actually going to really press out as much liquid as we can. And to do that, you'll notice I actually do this anytime I'm cooking with tofu. Tofu has a really high water content. And so anytime I'm cooking it, you know, stir fry, whatever, I'll go ahead and press it out, or press out as much water as I can. So super simple. I'm just going to wrap it up in a towel, put something heavy on it. Let's see, I'm going to put this pot lid right on top. And I'm just going to let that sit there as I'm prepping all my other ingredients. Move this to the side. All right, if you're not making tofu today, don't worry about it. We'll go on to the next step. Okay, let's go ahead and start off with our green onions. So both recipes ask for green onions. If you're making both, it's about I'm gonna go ahead and chop about 4 stalks of green onions, 4-ish. And the reason why we're gonna start with produce first, obviously, is for kitchen safety. We never wanna cut any type of raw meat before we cut raw veggies. So we'll work on all of our vegetables first, and then we'll go ahead and do our fish. And I bought ahi today, but you can also use salmon, anything sashimi grade. All right, so before I get started, there's one quick little tip that I want to show you guys. If you have a paper towel or some sort of thin dish towel, actually mine has these like rubber sides, but one of the biggest things, or one of the biggest mistakes that I think a lot of home cooks make, is that they don't secure their cutting boards. So the way to do that is actually to wet a paper towel, or again, like a really thin dish towel. And you'll actually see restaurant chefs do this as well. I actually used to work at a Japanese izakaya here in Portland making sushi. And we, it was kind of taboo if you didn't put something underneath your cutting board. Somebody scolded me for it. All right, so putting that paper towel underneath makes it a lot easier for my cutting board to stay nice and secure, and it won't go anywhere. All right, once we've got our cutting board secured, I can say this in all of my classes, but a second quick tip, how to properly hold a knife, is actually to use your pointer finger and your thumb, and you're gonna pinch the knife, like so. Again, pointer finger and thumb. You're gonna pinch, this is called the heel, this like corner, or this bottom edge, the heel of the knife. And then you're just gonna wrap the rest of your fingers around the handle. And that's gonna give you the most control, as opposed to, I see a lot of people cut like this, or a lot of people, like their pointer fingers often kind of sneak up and rest on the spine of the knife. You really wanna practice, and it takes time, I'll say that. But if you'd like to practice, the proper way to hold a knife is to, again, pinch grip, and then just comfortably rotate those, or wrap those fingers around the handle. All right, so we are just going to dice again. I've got about 1, 2, 3, maybe one too many, about 4 stalks of green onions, and I'm just going to really thinly slice just the green parts. And I'll keep them in a small pile on the side. So again, kind of bunching them all up together. You'll notice that when I cut too, I'm also going to curl my fingers back. This is called bear claw, so my non-dominant hand. Curling it back will allow me to keep my fingers nice and safe. And again, you'll want to try to get it as thin as possible, just because we don't want large chunks of green onion. And once you get to the white parts, go ahead and stop cutting. We're actually not going to use the white parts of the green onions today. Yeah, if you've taken one of my classes before, you'll know I always talk about knife safety and knife skills a lot. I think it's definitely something to practice, but by no means did it feel comfortable making that switch the first time that I even did it. I remember a chef friend of mine had taught me that when I was working at the restaurant, and I was like, this feels so uncomfortable. But over time and practice, once I continue doing it, it got better. Cool, so I've got about 4-ish stalks of green onion. I think I might actually do one more. I always feel like, personally, I use green onions so often that I'm like, if I over chop, that's better than under chopping. Oh, And just a random tidbit, if any of you, I just recently learned that the green parts of a green onion are acceptable in a low FODMAP diet, whereas the whites are not. Just a random fun fact. All right. Also, quick tip, if you fill up a jar of water with about an inch of water at the bottom, just enough to cover the roots, green onions will regrow. I actually had a bunch, oh, I just cut it actually. They'll regrow the green parts just to kind of, you know, I've had them grow maybe like 2 or 3 times, 2 or 3 cycles, but I think it's really cool. I kind of just, I now keep it by the window because it's kind of cool in the house. But sometimes I will keep it off, or I guess away from the window if it's in the summertime. That's so fun. I love regrowing things. Green onions are my favorite. All right. Cool. All right, how are we doing? I'll give you guys just a little bit more time to go ahead and cut those green onions up. All right, does anybody need more time to cut them? No? Oh, that's okay. Great, awesome. Let's go ahead and move on to our onions. So I bought a sweet onion. You'll notice that this one is actually really small. Usually I only use half of an onion. But what we're gonna do is I peeled back all the layers. Again, typically in Hawaii, you use a Maui onion, which is, I'd say, similar to Walla Walla or a sweet onion. It's not the same flavor, I think, as like a white onion or a yellow onion. That being said, if that's what you bought, it'll taste fine. Just note that you might put a little bit less, just because it's going to be not as sweet as a sweet onion. But all we're going to do is we're going to essentially cut kind of north to south, vertically through the root, leaving the root intact, like so. So you'll see, I always leave, you know, part of the root on, so that way that all the layers stay together. And then from there, I'm just going to cut off the tips. And then we're just going to thinly slice kind of into half moon rounds like so. And again, if your onion is pretty big, you can actually go ahead and cut a slit down the middle before you cut those rings, just so that they're not, you know, the rings aren't gigantic. But you'll see that these are almost like paper thin. You want them to be as thin as possible because these are going to go in raw. We don't want it to be too thick. I think a large chunk of raw onions would not be great. And these onions, I forgot to mention, are for the shoyu ahi. Okay. So I think that should be enough for one. I'm going to make half today, so it's about 1/4 cup-ish. I'll just put those to the side. You can always omit this. Not all recipes will call for onion, but the one that I use does. All right, next up, I am going to cut an avocado today. I know this is not traditional, but I thought it'd be fun. And also I love showing people how to cut avocados because they're just so fun to cut. Let's see which ones. So again, if you're not using avocado, that's totally fine. Again, typically, I actually usually just do poke, rice, and seaweed. But I thought it'd be fun today and do an avocado. So give you guys actually a quick second to go ahead and finish up those onions. Put them to the side. Awesome. Does anybody need more time for their onion? You guys all good? Seeing some nose. Okay, cool. All right, let's go ahead and cut our avocado. This is fun. I'm going to show you the way that we actually usually do it, or the way that I was taught in the Japanese restaurant that I worked at. So all you're going to do is, I always like to keep the avocado on the cutting board whenever I'm cutting an avocado. I know a lot of people like to cut it in their hands, but I can't remember who was telling. Oh, a former coworker of mine was telling me that hand injuries, like knife injuries to the hand, are the most common form of injury from cutting avocados. And I was like, okay, I mean, I guess that makes sense. But just to be extra safe, what I like to do is actually just cut down until I find the seed and then just rotate the avocado, and it's always touching the table. So I never run the risk of cutting it into my hand. Ooh, a tiny little seed. Same thing applies when I'm trying to get the pit out. I never will hold the avocado in my hand and whack the knife up for obvious reasons. If I miss, ow. So I just lightly tap the heel, again, this is the heel of the knife, into the seed. Kind of give it a little wiggle and see if I can get it out. Where's this one? Doesn't want to come out. Oh, I just put this one. Oh, this one's really in there. All right. That one's not, avocado's not ripe enough. No problem, I'll use the other half. Let's see if this avocado is ripe. Such a mystery, cutting into avocados. There we go. Okay, so I've got my avocado. I've got the seed out. I'm actually gonna go ahead and cut it again into a quarter. And what that does is it allows me to really easily peel the skin off. Much easier than, I guess, a half of an avocado. I'm just gonna peel that skin off. And again, I've got it in my, it's a quarter, like so. And all I'm gonna do is I'm essentially going to lie it down on the flat side. I'm gonna, let's see, I'm gonna rotate my camera so you can see this a little bit better. Cool. So I've got my avocado. I'm actually just going to, so you'll see, this is my knife, straight up and down. I'm actually going to angle the blade towards me. And I'm gonna cut at an angle so that I get these nice, essentially I'll get a nice little fan of avocado slices. Be really careful of those fingers, but this is essentially what I'm looking for. And then I can go ahead and fan it out on my bowl later when I am ready to, when I'm ready to make it all nice and fancy. All right, so we'll do that again one more time. I'm gonna peel the skin off if it wants to come off. Sometimes when your avocados are not ripe enough, the skin just doesn't want to go off. I think that's my avocado chicken. Does anyone know if avocados are in season? I guess technically they may always be in season somewhere, but I presume there's summer fruit.
cutting the avocado really thin?
I am. So it's about 1/4 of an inch. Think of like 2 quarters, 2 or 3 quarters stacked on top of each other.
Okay.
Pretty thin.
Okay, pretty thin. Okay.
You
Thank
can
you.
always, dice it up into chunks. Doesn't really matter. This is kind of just the way that I like to present it, because I like to have the nice little like fan of avocado.
Right, of course.
But this is totally, yes, you could cut it up any way you wanted to.
Got it. Thank you.
Oh yeah, no problem. Cool. So one more time, I'm going to go ahead and again, angle my knife. You'll notice that the tip of the knife is always touching the board. And I'm just going to use that as a guide, slicing really thin, kind of as thin as I can. That's not true. Again, about 1/4 of an inch. And then I can just go ahead and fan out. So it's like a nice pretty flower. I'll keep it together for now, but we'll just put those to the side. All right. Would anybody like me to repeat that one more time, or are we feeling pretty good? Maybe a thumbs up if we're good. Maybe a thumbs side. Okay, yeah. You guys are rocking it. Cool. This is the one feature of virtual cooking classes that could be improved on. I shouldn't say one, but one of, where I'm like, how's everyone doing? So that's why I'm consistently checking in, because I can't, just pop over your shoulder like I could in a normal class. All right, so we've got our green onions, our white onions, and our avocado. I'm gonna grab a plate, put everything on it. We'll go ahead and keep those to the side. It's nice to prep everything ahead of time so that when we're ready to, build everything, it's just a lot easier. And again, we always want to make sure that we cut all of our veggies first before we cut our fish. All right. So for the tofu, all I'm going to do is cut it up into nice small cubes. I'll start with half. I don't think I'm going to use the whole thing today. Cool. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it in half lengthwise, and then just cut it into about 3/4, almost an inch. Cube. They don't necessarily have to be perfect. We just want them to be kind of small. Cool. So you can see they're kind of, again, it should resemble, I guess, similarly, a similar size to the poke that we're going to cut up. This might be actually a little smaller than I'll cut the fish, but that's okay. And again, I'm going to do half today, so that a block of tofu is typically it's either 14 or 16 ounces. So I'm going to do half tofu. I'm just going to put that aside in my bowl, and then that is the last of our veggies. So again, we've got our green onions, our white onions are thinly sliced, our avocado. Everything else, we won't need the cutting board again, which is good because now is time for the fish. So this is, this is what makes poke poke. It's all about the fish. In Hawaiian, poke actually roughly translates to mean slice or cut. And the story behind the origins of poke actually were that fishermen used to just cut up scraps of fish that they caught, cut it up into pieces, maybe put a little bit of Hawaiian sea salt, maybe some soy sauce if they had it, and just eat it on rice. And that's kind of has like it evolved into what we now know as the typical poke bowl. But it's kind of funny. There's this back and forth in Hawaii actually about what a poke bowl really is. And a lot of times in Hawaii, you'll just see the poke and the rice. There's not usually toppings. Like I remember the first time coming to the mainland, where it's like you could get edamame, you could get kimchi and seaweed, all these added extras, which I think are fun. But traditionally, it's just the fish and rice. So I think that's oh. Uh-oh. Hold on. Let's see what's going on with my. Lost this. All right, are we back? Phew. That was weird. But anyways, it's all about the fish. And so as I had kind of mentioned, when you're shopping for ingredients, you really want to make sure that your fish is, they'll call it sushi grade or sashimi grade. Again, that's really important because we're going to be eating the fish raw. So as I recommended earlier, the best place that I've found to go to is usually a fish market. That's typically where, that's their specialty. If you're here in Portland, there's a Portland fish market. That's really cool. That's actually where I got my ahi today. So again, ahi is just, this is wild yellowfin. But you'll want to make sure that you always, buy it right before you'd like to use it and then eat it as quickly as you can, basically. I'd say that poke doesn't necessarily last for more than about 4 to 5 days. The flavor, obviously, too, the fresher the better. That being said, as fresh as you can get is, the best. All right, so like I said, I'm going to be making some yellowtail ahi. All I'm going to do is start cutting it up into about 1-inch cubes. So kind of that bite size. And it doesn't really matter. You'll cut with the grain and against the grain. What I mean by that is that just similarly to meat, you'll see these kind of like striations or these lines. This is kind of the grain that I'm referring to. And cutting against the grain just means that you're cutting perpendicular to it. But in this case, we're actually going to be chopping it out into cubes. So we won't need to worry about that. And again, about 1 inch-ish. It doesn't necessarily need to be perfect. Just keep in mind that when you're eating it, you'll obviously want it to be bite-sized cubes. Not too big. And we'll just go ahead and cut up the entire piece of fish. Obviously in Hawaii, we're really spoiled to have access to such fresh fish, especially from Japan. When I used to work at or in the Japanese restaurant, they would actually fly in I shouldn't say most, some Japanese restaurants will fly in their fish overnight from Japan, whole, and the sushi chefs will cut it up, and that's what they'll have as their, nigiri or sashimi. I couldn't believe it. I was like, well, overnight, a whole fish. And when you're at the store and you're choosing a fish, you'll always want to look at the color of the fish. That will tell you a lot about how fresh it is. I mean, you could ask the fishmonger as well. But the longer that the fish sits, the more it'll oxidize and it'll turn kind of a darker brownish color. Similarly with meat, the same thing will happen just when, you know, it's kind of a natural chemical process that happens with oxygen. I would try, or I recommend avoiding any fish that's kind of that like almost neon pink, you know, that really bright pink, just because that means that they've used a lot of chemicals to preserve its color. If you are using salmon or any other, you know, sushi grade fish, you're going to do the exact same thing. You're just going to go ahead and remove the skin if this fish has skin on it, and you'll just cut it up into, again, about inch-ish cubes. So it's about the size that we're looking for. Cool. Anybody have any questions about fish or sushi? Silence means no.
Actually,
yeah.
I do have a question.
Oh, yeah.
Does the fish have to be raw?
No. Well,
Okay.
You mean for poke?
Yeah.
Technically, yes.
Okay.
Actually, no. You could
Okay.
well, I've never had poke be fully cooked fish, but I have had seared ahi poke, which a lot of people who aren't huge fans of raw fish particularly enjoy, just because you sear the top side and the bottom side of the steak, and then you cut it up into cubes. So it's almost like half cooked, half not. And texturally, it's a little bit firmer where it's cooked, obviously. And so a lot of my friends who don't typically like raw fish, like seared ahi poke.
Okay.
But yeah, typically everything is raw. That's why I highly encourage getting sashimi grade fish, just because you are going to consume it raw. You want to make sure that the fish was handled properly enough, so that there's no pathogens or any sort of foreign things in there that shouldn't be in there.
Gotcha. Okay, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Sorry that I wasn't clear in the description.
No, I understand.
Yeah.
I got you.
I mean, honestly, if you were to cook this and still put it in the sauce, it would still taste great.
Gotcha. Okay.
Cool. All right, so now that I've got my fish all cut, I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and put it to the side in a bowl. And we won't need our cutting boards anymore, so I can go ahead and put that aside. Again, I've got my 2 types of protein that I'm going to be working with today on my sides, and then we will go ahead and make some sauces. This is the fun part. Okay, I'm gonna pause for a second. Okay, let's see. Oh. Hey, where is Kiki? Kiki, are you still on the line per chance?
I'm still here.
Perfect. Could you do me a quick favor and spotlight both of my cameras?
Oh my gosh.
Apologize. I forgot to check in with you on that.
I'm gonna be so honest with you. I'm still learning how to.
Oh, sure. Okay, awesome. No problem. I'll explain. So if you hover your mouse over one of my screens, there's 3 little dots that pop up in the top right-hand corner. You're gonna click one and it's gonna say Spotlight Video.
Okay, let me see. I'm not seeing those 3 dots at the moment, but maybe it might be. Here, can I make you the host and?
Oh, absolutely. That could totally work too.
Okay. All right, done. I don't know which one I've made the host. I'll make both of them the host.
Let's see.
Or I guess
Cool. While you're doing that, I'm looking at some of the chat questions. Does the cutting method help to not cry while slicing onions because the root is still intact? That's a wonderful question. Unfortunately, there is, aside from cutting, it sounds silly, but aside from wearing goggles or glasses, there really isn't a good way to not cry. Some of us are more sensitive than others, but I was reading a book, it's called The Food Lab, and it's by Kenji Alt Lopez, and he is a biochemist, and he was talking about how the reason why people cry is because when you cut into an onion, it releases chemicals that cause not irritation, but cause a reaction to cry. So unfortunately, I think the only way to prevent crying is to actually cover your eyeballs. So there's that physical barrier. I don't necessarily do that, but no, keeping the root intact actually helps, just so that when I'm cutting cutting the thin slices, the onion isn't just kind of falling apart everywhere. If I were to cut off the root, all of those layers are kind of just, can slide on top of each other. So I keep the root intact just to hold everything together. I wish it helped with not crying. That would be lovely. And I think, let's see. Oh, Ginger asked, where do you get your sashimi fish in Portland? So there's a company called Flying Fish, like I'm flying fish. And they were actually the company that the head sushi chef recommended to me to purchase fish. And they're great. That's actually where I got my ahi today. But there's also the Portland Fish Market. They have sashimi grade salmon. I almost bought that today. Salmon and ahi. Obviously, they have salmon more frequently just because it's more available here in the Pacific Northwest. But if you are in Portland, that's where I got mine from. Cool. All right. So let's go ahead and start with the shoyu sauce. I don't think I was able to spotlight my video, but that's okay. Well, if you can.
I've been trying, but unsuccessful.
It's okay. I totally forgot to ask in the beginning, so that's my fault. Don't worry about it. We'll get through it. We'll do the things. All right, so let's go ahead and start with our shoyu poke. So I am going to use a jar. Okay, I'll use this jar. The reason why I'm going to actually build my sauce in a jar is that I am not going to eat all of this poke today. I cannot do that. So the best way to actually store homemade poke is to keep the sauce and the fish separate. That will help. It's not one of those things where it's like the longer you marinate it, the better it tastes. It'll actually kind of take away from the texture. And so tofu is not the same. You could essentially soak it in the tofu, that's fine. But I'm going to build my sauce in a jar. And again, I'm going to keep it separate from my fish and, put it together when I'm ready to eat it. So that's why I'm building it in a jar. And you can build it in, a reusable container or whatever you want to store it in. Mason jars are just my favorite. I always use them. All right, so first things first, we're going to add in a 1/4 cup of, sorry, not a 1/4 cup, a 1/2 cup of soy sauce. So as I mentioned earlier, most soy sauce isn't gluten-free. I use either tamari or gluten-free soy sauce. Essentially, the reason why soy sauce isn't gluten-free is because it's usually made with wheat. It's soybeans and wheat. So it's not actually the soy that's not gluten-free. It's just wheat that's used as a thickener. Tamari is just, soybeans. All right, so like I said, 1/2 cup. And if you're doing both sauces today, if you have a little, if we make this full batch and you're like, oh my gosh, that's extra, I don't know what to do with it. You can use it in stir fries. You can use it to marinate chicken. Like there's so many different ways you can use this. So don't worry if you're making a full batch. All right, to that half cup, we are going to add in, I'd say start out with 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. It can be toasted or not toasted. That's totally up to you. I'm just using, it's just 100% sesame oil. And I say start out with 1 teaspoon, just because some folks don't necessarily like the really strong flavor of sesame oil. So you can always add more, but let's go ahead and start out with just 1 teaspoon. So again, I've got half a cup of shoyu, 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. All right, so this I actually brought back from Hawaii. I know that they sell them typically in Asian markets or in the Asian section of grocery stores. But this sea salt is from Hawaii. This is typically what's used. If you don't have access to Alalea sea salt, you can use like a coarse sea salt. That's totally fine. You'll want it to be something as coarse as you can. Well, I shouldn't say as coarse, but you'll want to choose a coarse sea salt. And we're just going to put a pinch of sea salt in there. You can always add to it later if you need a little bit more salt, but we're just going to put the salt right in. Cool. Okay. I'll also go ahead and add in about 1 green onion. So it's about a tablespoon of that green onion that we sliced really thinly. We'll put that in there. As well as we're also going to go ahead and add in the onions. And when you're adding in the onion, again, I typically say about, a 1/4 cup of those onions go in there. Transfer jars. Lid. All right, and then I'm just going to go ahead and you can either give it a stir or give it a shake, just to mix it all together. Again, we want that salt to kind of dissolve a little bit, but those onions will be in there. Oh, nice. Give it a shake. Ginger shared a good tip. All right. That putting onions in the freezer for 20 minutes might. Ooh, I've never actually given the freezer a try. I wonder if that helps kind of prevent those chemicals in the onion from, I don't know, releasing. No joke, my uncle at home just has onion cutting goggles and he swears by it and it works for him every time. I just can't. I just can't get myself to buy a pair of onion cutting goggles. All right, and that's basically the sauce. So we'll go ahead and put that to the side and finish up our second sauce. Let's see how we're doing. Cool. Yeah, let's go ahead and finish up our second sauce. So this one's fun. It's going to be our spicy mayo, and typically this is made with Kewpie mayo, which is Japanese style mayo, but we can go ahead and use regular mayo as well. All right.
Jenny, one question.
Oh yes, sure.
Did you put sugar in the first one?
Soy?
No, did you put sugar?
Oh, I did not put sugar.
Okay.
That's optional. Sorry, that's a great question. It's optional. You can put in like a half teaspoon of sugar if you want. Let's actually go ahead. I'm gonna have you guys taste it. Some people prefer to put in sugar for kind of more of a sweeter, almost think like teriyaki-ish. Not super sweet. I should use the teriyaki as like a comparison. But you most certainly can put in a half teaspoon of sugar. but that's optional. I typically don't, but I know a lot of people who do like it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for catching that. I totally forgot. Again, because I don't mind to put it in there. But yeah, if it tastes a little bit bitter, or you're not, really a huge fan, you can always add in a little bit of sugar. And if you're missing a little bit of, or you want a little bit more of that sesame flavor too, you can always go ahead and add in another teaspoon of sesame oil. Because remember, it's about 1 to 2 teaspoons. So much of this is very much, taste preferences. So taste as we go and adjust as needed, always. Cool. Okay, let's go ahead and get going on our spicy mayo. So as I mentioned, you can use QP is just a brand of Japanese mayo. But we are going to go ahead and start off with a 1/4 cup of mayo. I'm assuming you could definitely, substitute vegan mayo. The taste might be slightly different, but I can't say I've ever tried it. All right, so I've got my 1/4 cup. And this is going to kind of be the base of our sauce. Again, it's called spicy mayo. All right. To that, we're going to go ahead and add in 1 tablespoon of soy sauce. We'll add in 1 teaspoon of sesame oil. And this one calls for a lot of scallions. So I'm going to put in about 2 tablespoons of it. So we've got our 1/4 cup of mayo, our 1 tablespoon of gluten-free soy sauce, 1 teaspoon of sesame oil, and again, about 4-ish scallions. If you would like to add in some white onions to this, you totally can. I don't typically. That's why I put it as optional. But to that, we're going to add in, this is kind of, let's go ahead and give this a stir actually. This is going to be the base of our sauce. And from here, again, it's basically a sriracha mayo, but you can add in as much or as little sriracha as you'd like. Obviously, the more that you add, the spicier it'll be. So I'd say maybe I'd say just add in about, let's say, a tablespoon, taste it, and you just keep adding until it's the right spice level, I should say, for you. Because again, everybody's a little bit different. I typically do it by what color it is. I don't usually measure it out, but I'll start out with a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. Start out with a little bit, give it a taste, add in a little bit more. If for some reason you add too much and you're like, oh my gosh, it's too spicy, the way to counter that is to actually just go ahead and add in a little bit more mayonnaise. That's pretty good. Go ahead and add in just a little bit. My sauce is looking a little thin. So the 2 ingredients that I should say, excuse me, spice a little bit in my throat, that you can play with are the mayo and the sriracha. So again, if you put a little bit too much sriracha and it's too spicy, add a little bit of mayonnaise. If you put, if there's too much mayonnaise and you want a little bit more flavor, add a little bit more sriracha. And then kind of just go back and forth until you get this nice, creamy sauce. Make sure there's no lumps. And this is a sauce that I make a lot when I'm making sushi. I like to make this spicy now. Or if you're fried chicken, delicious with this sauce. Chicken karaage is another class that I offer. It's very good with this spicy mayo. Cool. All right, and then again, this is just going to stay. I'm going to keep this separate from my other sauce, or excuse me, from my proteins. Again, just to kind of keep things fresher, longer. Cool. Does anybody need any repeats for the ingredients on that spicy mayo? We're good. Awesome. Great. Cool. All right. So we've got our shoyu sauce. We've got our spicy ahi sauce. Let's go ahead and now build our bowls. So like I had said before, I typically like to I typically like to make these bowls or prepare the protein right before I'm about to eat it. So let's say I'd like to go ahead and make my poke or my ahi poke. I'm going to do a spicy ahi tofu and a shoyu ahi poke. What I'm going to do is I'll portion out, let's say, you know, a single portion of my poke. Go ahead and give my sauce a stir. And just pour a little bit on top. Essentially, I want to coat the poke, but I don't want it to be drenched in it, if that makes sense. So you might use a little bit less sauce than you think. And then I'll just give it a nice stir. It'll soak up some of that flavor. So yeah, even this is probably just a little bit too much sauce. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little bit. So kind of like so, where we've got it, it's nice and coated, but it's not swimming in a pool of its own sauce. And then I'll go ahead and grab a bowl, grab some rice. I always like to show people this trick. In a restaurant, you'll typically, you know, see this nice round thing of rice. The way that they actually do that is you take a bowl and you can wet the inside of the bowl a little bit just to make sure that the rice doesn't stick. I know that this won't actually stick because I've done this before. But what's really fun, I'm all about presentation. I do like how my food looks. I'll take my rice, and you can use any kind of rice. People in Hawaii get a little, what's the word? I think they get a little upset when you use brown rice. Everybody, like it's very traditional to use white rice. That's not to say that if you have brown rice, it's a bad thing. It's just, I find it to be kind of funny because I'm like, sometimes I want brown rice and that tastes good. And then sometimes I want white rice. I just think it's kind of funny. Booger's not real if it's made with brown rice. That's not true. All right, so I've got my bowl. I've gone ahead and filled it up. I only put in about a half cup, so that's about how much I'd like today. And again, kind of gently press it into that bowl, and all I'm going to do is I'm going to invert it into my other bowl. Oh, that's a sad little. All right, maybe I can fill that up with enough rice. Try that again. There we go. All right, fill up my bowl. I'm going to invert it. There we go. And you see how pretty of a, it's just like this nice, almost like perfect ball of rice. That's how they do it. They just use a bowl and a bowl. All right. So a fun little trick if you're, wanting to be a little extra fancy. And then to that, I'm just gonna go ahead and put my poke around the side. Feel free to add a little bit extra sauce if you want to do that. I typically like to add in some, where did I put them? Here we go. Some fresh green onion, just a little bit on top, just for color. That's pretty. I'm gonna also add my avocado. Again, I've got my avocado nice and sliced. I'm gonna remove the ends because it's not really good for them. I'm gonna fan them out evenly. Almost like a little flower. Yeah. There you go. A little flour. Let's see. Oh, hello. I'm also going to eat it. Again, like I mentioned before, think of this almost kind of like deconstructed sushi. I've got my seaweed snacks. They're typically gluten-free. These ones are certified. They don't have to be, but I like to put in a couple on the side, like so. And there we go. Voila. We've got our cute little poke bowl. We've got our spicy ahi, some avocado. You can put, edamame, kimchi. I always like to eat it with seaweed. And yeah, there we go. We can do the same thing. The same thing applies with the spicy sauce. You'll go ahead and mix it up with whatever protein you'd like. I'd probably do that with tofu for this one. But you mix it all up and you add it separately. But again, I'll go ahead and store any leftovers with the fish separate from the sauce, just so that it stays a little bit more fresh, and then eat it with seaweed. And so I'll go ahead and show you actually. Yeah, think like deconstructed seaweed. I think this is actually starting to become super trendy on TikTok, if anybody is there. I am not there. But someone was telling me that it is. But essentially just take some seaweed. I've got some rice. Put my poke in the middle, maybe like 1 or 2 pieces. Fold it up. And there's my deconstructed fish seaweed or sushi. Really good. Excuse me. Oh, yeah, it's really, it's just like, this reminds me of home. And again, it's all about, the quality of the fish. So the better quality fish that you can get your hands on, I think the better your poke will be. But it's real simple, really easy. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed it. I'm looking at the time. Sorry, we're a little bit over. But thank you guys so much for joining. Does anybody have any questions? Or anybody, how does it taste? First off.
Delicious.
Ooh, awesome.
We are still preparing the plate.
Oh, yeah. Take your time, make it look pretty. Yeah, you guys all.
It's very pretty, so we're taking our time.
We're perfectionists.
I have a question
Sure.
about the next class. The pumpkin dessert you're going to teach.
Yes.
Is the whipping cream like what you taught with the strawberry shortcake?
Yes, it's very similar.
Okay, so you could tell us how to do both that way.
Yes.
Okay,
Exactly, yeah. Whipped cream is the same, and you can make it either with heavy whipped cream or chilled coconut milk. You know,
Okay.
dairy. Yeah.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know, I'm teaching another class coming up this Saturday. It's all about making pumpkin butter, homemade pumpkin butter. I was really inspired because I actually went to Trader Joe's and saw it, but it cost like $5 for this tiny, tiny little jar. And I was like, well, I can make that. And so we're gonna make pumpkin butter parfaits with homemade whipped cream. Everything's gonna be gluten-free. So yeah, if you would like to join in on that class, you can find the event either on Eventbrite, just type in pumpkin butter parfaits, or you can go to laulimakitchen.com, and that's our website, and you can find the cooking class there. But yes, great question. Thank you for asking that. Anybody else have any other questions?
So I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So for the tofu, we don't cook it, right? You just do it like you did the tuna?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, you're gonna treat it the exact same way. It's gonna be raw. You can put it, in either sauce that will taste good. But yeah, you won't cook it.
Onions and
Sesame.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I always want to give a veggie option because I never want to leave people out if they don't consume fish.
like everything on my plate now.
I give people option. What else? I feel like I had something else that I was going to mention. Out of my brain. All right. Well, actually, that's what it was. So as a cooking teacher, or culinary teacher, one of my favorite parts about teaching is kind of seeing people enjoy their food and enjoy the process of cooking. I would like to ask you all a favor. If you have Instagram, if you could take a picture and tag me. My handle is Laulima Kitchen, Laulima Kitchen. I always tell people, I selfishly kind of just would love to see what yours looks like, and kind of hear how it tastes. So if you've got Instagram, feel free to tag me. Teacher in me is just like, love my students, love to see what you guys are up to, or what you made, because I can't see it like I could in person. But feel free to tag me on Instagram. If you have any questions, if you would like the recipe, feel free to I'm not sure, Kiki, you could probably speak to this. I'm not sure if the recipe was sent to you all. But
no, it's not sent. We can do that, but it's also posted on the website link to register for this event. You'll see the list of ingredients and
okay, awesome. If you would like a kind of like a email or access to the recipe, feel free to either send me an email. It's just laulimakitchen@gmail.com, or you can kind of personally send me a message here in this chat. Just send me your email and I will send that over to you. I'll get you the recipe there. So a lot of times I'll post it on my website as well. This one isn't currently up on my website. So I will go ahead and send that to you all in the meantime, if you would like it. Cool. All right, well, if you all don't have any other questions, thank you guys again so much for coming and hanging out with me. Again, making one of my favorite sort of like childhood recipes and allowing me to share that with you all. Special thanks to Alder Commons for allowing us to have this. Again, please check out some of their events, not only this week, just for, workshop week, but they host a ton of really cool stuff. And a lot of it is virtual, just in case you're not here in Portland. I highly, highly recommend checking them out. Just a lot of really cool stuff happening. We're just talking about it's a really cool place. So thank you guys again for coming. Hopefully see you guys in another cooking class soon.
Thank you so much. This was so fun.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.